Welcome to Locked On Golden Knight. Today we examine VGK and other cap-crushed teams.
You're Locked On Golden Knights, your daily podcast on the Vegas Golden Knights, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hi again, everyone. I'm Tony Cardasco, along with Chris Golick from Las Vegas, and you are watching and listening to Locked On Golden Knights. You can find us at Locked On VGK, now on YouTube, as well as Twitter. I am Tony Cardasco, at Tony Dasco on Twitter. He is TD Chris G on Twitter. We are brought to you today by Bet Online, with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. The NFL kicking off on Thursday preseason. We've got Las Vegas against Jacksonville in the Hall of Fame game. Find out more on Bet Online and Bet Online where the game starts. So, Chris, over the weekend, the Hockey News came out with an article, and according to Cap Friendly, it said that there are 9 NHL teams that are going to be over the cap. Lo and behold, I can guess, I think, in one note, one of the teams, of course, that's on that list. More cap gymnastics coming up again for
roulette,
VGK.
cap roulette,
cap gymnastics, cap roulette, whatever. Just again trying to skirt everything with the salary cap. And so, the article said something that just kind of grabbed me too. It said Shea Weber was a band-aid for an organization that can't print money fast enough. And it went on to discuss the $8 million in cap relief, Max Pacioretty and Dylan Coghlan, and that deal going to Carolina. And so it's a never-ending saga, and VGK would want to say that they're not, in any sort of salary cap. They're not under any salary cap constraints, but here we are again. We're going into a season, one of 9 teams that have their backs up against the wall.
Yeah, this is how it's going to be, at least for the foreseeable future, probably for the next 3 or 4 years. I think I read something somewhere else that stated the deal with Shea Weber. There's going to be more LTIR things and stuff happening. So I think on paper, even though at this moment we're not cap compliance, I think we will be based on the terms of the trade and stuff like that. I could be off on that. I don't have the article to cite, unfortunately, but I did catch that over the weekend. But Cap Friendly has us right around 1.3 over or something like that at the moment. Pete DeBoer said it best, and this is also kind of contradictory to what Kelly McCrimmon said. And
it's Monday, and already you're quoting Pete DeBoer?
It's Monday, and I'm quoting Pete DeBoer. They somewhere along the lines, they asked DeBoer if about the salary cap situation and things like that. And he basically said he's been on teams that are cap teams where they're basically nuking off all their salary. And he's been on teams that have not been cap teams where they are, pinching pennies and things like that. And, he'd rather be on a cap team, obviously. So this is the story that VGK is going to tell every single year. They're going to try and sell the fact that the cap isn't that, that yes, we're up against it, but they have a plan. And, the plan does not always go according to plan. Again, coming to season 6, there are going to be games where we're only going to dress 17 skaters, or we're going to do that nonsense with 11 forwards and maybe 7 defensemen every now and then. Although without Dylan Coghlan, I don't know if we're going to be able to do that anymore, unless we get John Merrill back in the fold or something like that, our leading forward scorer for the Golden Knights from the defensive side of things with 1 goal. But this is how it's going to be. This is exactly how it's going to be. It was a Third Eye Blind song I just quoted right there. And hopefully they can, spin the roulette wheel good enough to the point where it's not going to cost us any games, as like they did a couple seasons ago, and most notably against the Colorado Avalanche down the stretch.
I still want to believe that the VGK is going to be signing someone else, a big name, someone to fill one of the voids with this team. I still think they need some more beef, an enforcer, something like that along those lines. They still have to sign the Knicks at night. That's Knight, with Nic Roy and Nick Hague. And they also have to sign Keegan Colasar. No telling what that's going to amount to come arbitration time. And so, yeah, and then this article went on to say that the clock is ticking for Vegas until the nightmare can no longer be avoided. Is it that deep? And sooner or later, do you think things could crumble here?
I mean, every team goes through ups and downs and everything in between. The Colorado Avalanche, you look at what it took to get them to where they are. The Tampa Bay Lightning, same thing. Detroit Red Wings are finally on the upward slope, although the Detroit really hit it hard as far as the offseason went and acquisition. So I guess Yzerman felt that there's enough pieces in place to where it's time to start bringing in the leadership to help with the younger players. And even you see Seattle kind of taking that same trajectory, which I found kind of odd with some of their offseason signings. So, I mean, yes, is there a time where Vegas might only get 87 points and not even sniff the playoffs? Every franchise goes through it, whether it's self-inflicted, like what the Blackhawks are going to do, or whether it's like what did happen last year with the Golden Knights and, not making the playoffs, unfortunately. Is it going to be this season or next season? I don't think we're at that stage yet, but 4 or 5 years down the road from now, maybe, but same breath, 4 or 5 years down the road from now, Petrangelo's contract finally gets off the book. William Karlsson, I think, finally gets off the book by then. So maybe McCrimmon will find a way if McCrimmon's still the GM 5 years from now. I know what your thoughts are on that, obviously. Will they find a way to be competitive year over year and go on a long run of either making the playoffs, being a cup contender, or being close to playoffs? Or is there going to be 3 or 4 seasons where we're going to be in the draft lottery and hoping to get that number 1 pick, and then we're on the 7-year rebuild? I don't know.
So Kelly McCrimmon said recently that all the good teams and playoff teams are up against the cap. And then I went through these 9 teams that are up against the cap, and 5 of the 9 teams were not in the playoffs. Those teams that are up against the cap currently are the Flyers, the Canadiens, the Kings. Kings have $1.5 million in cap space. That's it. And they still have some pieces that they need to re-sign. Vancouver, Toronto, Edmonton, the Islanders, Tampa Bay, and of course the VGK. And so it's not every team that's contending that is up against the cap.
No, no doubt. And, this is obviously where some of these long-term deals come back to bite you, or these Band-Aid deals. Dadonov is probably the most notable as far as a very odd signing that was a big head scratcher given, shipping Marc-Andre Fleury the previous offseason and coming in with a 20-goal score at 5.5 or whatever Dadonov's deal was. So, yes, the check will, cash. There will be you will answer for the moves that are made today, whether they're just simply to help season 5's or season 6's teams. And then if it's going to hurt you in season 8 and 9 and down the road. VGK has shown they have no qualms about moving on from players either when the time might be either needed or when the time is right, starting obviously with Pacioretty and Fleury. Fleury was certainly a cap casualty. We let him go for absolutely nothing. The entire league had leverage on us. Fleury gets flipped for a 3rd-round pick from Chicago. Good move by Chicago. Same situation kind of with Pacioretty. Basically, it reminded me of the movie Draft Day where Kevin Costner is negotiating in the end, and I'm picturing McCrimmon begging the entire league to, take on Pacioretty. And then finally Carolina says, yeah, we'll take him. And then the deal is almost done, but give us Dylan Coghlan. When they go for that kick returner in the movie Draft Day, kind of the same thing like that. So sure, for lack of a better term, the league had Vegas buy the balls for the last couple of years, and that trend's going to continue. There was another article that came out basically saying Carolina exposed Vegas in their situation. I thought that, and I forgot who put that out. I thought that was just a garbage article, to be completely frank. Everyone knows what everyone's situation is. Carolina was just gave the best package, if you will, to take Pacioretty off our hands. So yeah, we're a cap team. We are a cap team. There are going to be weird things where we're going to have a 3-game, 3 days off. They're going to call up 2 players from the Silver Knights on Monday. And then before Wednesday's game, 4 hours before the game, they're going to send it back down. That's the reality that Vegas Golden Knights hockey is going to be right now. And, we talked about this. Had Vegas gone on the traditional expansion path, would they be better going into season 6 if they would have simply lost for a couple of seasons, or are we on a better path right now to win the Stanley Cup in season 6? And that's a real strange argument to have right now. It really is.
Yeah, so many question marks. And still, Chris, I still want to believe that this team is one move away from being a team that's in contention. And I don't know what that piece might be. I've talked about some more beef, an enforcer, a goon, if you will, because they didn't play dirty enough, I don't think, last season, more physical. They have to have that sort of a presence. They were out hit every game, pretty much. But do you foresee another move by VGK outside of re-signing the Knicks and Kolasar?
Um, right now, I don't, unless there's a weird injury or something. Like Mark Stone is still somewhat of a question mark given his back situation. Obviously, the goalies, we're wondering what's going to happen there. I do think Vegas could end up being a buyer around the trade deadline, depending on how things shake out. There's a lot of teams that are going to be selling around the trade deadline, starting with the Chicago Blackhawks. I mean, let's just get funky for a second here. And Alex Pietrangelo goes down, come game number 47. He's not going to come back until the playoffs or something like that. All of a sudden, Jonathan Taves is out there on the block, or Patrick Kane. I mean, I think that's the only path where Vegas makes a big notable splash. I certainly could see Vegas making a another like top 9-ish forward type move. I don't think necessarily in this offseason right now. I just don't see a path to that with having to figure out the RFA situation with Haig and Nic Roy and et cetera, and Kolasar, obviously. So I don't think anything else happens this offseason. We did bring in some reinforcements at the AHL level and some less notable two-way contracts as well, like Spencer Fu and stuff like that. So, one of those players could be a Band-Aid, or maybe we get lucky and one of those players pops. Who knows? But yeah, I'm with you, Tony, going back on your last point. I really wish we would have had a character player brought in this offseason, a sub $1 million player that simply is going to pound you, for lack of a better term, and have that charisma. This is back to the Reeves effect. I didn't miss Ryan Reeves until I watched the playoffs last season. I did not miss Ryan Reeves a bit. I missed the personality. I didn't miss him the second he put on the Golden Knights jersey, though. And my perspective has certainly flipped 100% on that. We need someone who has that charisma and character to help rebuild the identity. And if we're not going to do that, I hope Cassidy is going to establish a clear path for a new VGK identity that all the players on the roster will buy into.
Yeah, they have to go the route of goaltender. I think that's going to be something that's important somewhere down the line, because, again, the Remperswa will not be ready. The Panda will not be ready for the start of the season. Robin Leonard, and I just think that they could be in a world of hurt without having at least 2 grade A options there. And nothing against Logan Thompson. He'll be the opening day starter, and I feel that he's adequate enough. And I think he might be, at the end of the season, he was better than both of those goalies combined. I'm going to throw that out there. And then, and so you were on Locked On NHL yesterday, so we'll be sending out the link today. Let me guess the topic. Salary cap, off-season moves for VGK?
Yeah, I mean, kind of a
You're on the circuit now, brother.
Exactly, yes. Yeah, Golic on tour, folks. Coming to you from my pajamas in my office daily. But yeah, that was what we talked about. Talk about the off-season moves, and I think Gil thought I was going to be a little more of the negative and concerned route, and my
he
route.
He was talking to me. He must have felt he was talking to me.
Exactly. But I'm taking the glass half full approach right now. I'm simply looking at the results of seasons 1 through 4, looking at the healthy season 5 roster. And I'm hoping when you put all that into a blender and spin that for season 6, that it does work out. That's the hope. And we're going to show our plan, at least my plan, to replace Dadonov's and Pacioretty's output in our next segment, of course. But, I do feel good about things, and I wanted to portray that in our session. But, down the road, obviously, like we just alluded to a few minutes ago, yeah, there could be trouble, no doubt.
Coming up next, as Chris had mentioned, we will talk about, can VGK replace 50 goals without Dadonov, without Pacioretty? That'll come your way next, right here on Locked On Golden Knights. BetOnline.net is the fastest, it's the easiest way to check in on all of your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, now the National Football League kicking into gear this week, the NBA, of course, the NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered across the board. Head to BetOnline today. You can use your mobile device as well to learn more about the action happening today. BetOnline, where the game starts. Welcome back to Locked On Golden Knights. Tony Cardasco and Chris Golick from Las Vegas. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. And again, Locked On VGK now available on YouTube, thanks to Chris at Locked On VGK. And of course, online, wherever you get your podcast. We're on now every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Again, a lot of the good old content coming up to the top here. And again, like we've said before, we've had a ton of content. It's been a pretty busy and decent offseason for the VGK. And then, of course, we've made up a lot of things as well. We won't go into that. But replacing 50 goals without Dadonov and Pacioretty, this is something that you wanted to discuss for this upcoming season. And do you think that this formula will include a variety of 15-plus goal scorers for the VGK? And then I also want to get your take on Jack Eichel over, under goals this upcoming season.
Okay, fair enough. We'll hit Eichel last. So yes, I think 50 goals could be the ceiling. I mean, Pacioretty was actually on a much stronger pace last year for his limited games, but I think 50 is the potential number that VGK will have to absorb with their current roster. So where are these 50 goals going to come from? I think before, and I'm only looking at players that we're looking to take a step up. I'm not looking at Jonathan Marchessault to basically, score more goals. I'm not looking at Chandler Stevenson to score more goals. If it's nice if they do, but I don't think that's the way this exercise needs to play out. I'm simply looking at players that are going to need to step up to replace Pacioretty's outputs. I do think there will be somewhere between 8, 10, 12, maybe up to 15 goals that will be absorbed in the lineup simply by more opportunity without Pacioretty out there. So maybe a couple goals here for Marchie, a couple goals there for Stevenson, a couple random goals for a defenseman, stuff like that. So how do we get to 50-ish goals after that? First player I'm going to single out, Nic Roy. Nic Roy has had a very good upward trajectory since he joined VGK. 15 goals last year, playing amongst all the lineups. Nic Roy, I think, is going to be a staple in the top 9, even though that line 4 with him between Karlsson and Carrier, as exciting as that sounds, that might be Brett Howden's world. And Nic Roy, he could center, he could wind up playing center in any of the top 3 lines, depending on how things go throughout the injury, most likely on the wing somewhere. I've mentioned a bunch of times I would love to see Nic Roy and Nic Roy and Jack Eichel together with someone like Marchessault, because I think he'll clean up so many goals and, just do well. So I'm hoping Nic Roy can become a 20-goal scorer. That's only +5 from what he did last year. Reilly Smith, 16 goals last year, but again, some injuries that slowed him down a little bit.
If we can slow get start. Slow start too.
Exactly, 100%. So if we can get Reilly Smith just to that 20-goal ballpark, now that's 9 goals all of a sudden. This is going to be your favorite. Here, Tony. So, just
get to Chandler Stevenson. Go ahead.
No, stop it. We know what Stevenson's going to do. William Karlsson, folks. William Karlsson is really, in my opinion, the key to this plan working. And I'm trying to say that with a comfortable, straightish face, but I am concerned. So William Karlsson in the Gallant era, 43 goals, then 24 goals. But then in the DeBoer era, 15, 14, and 12 goals. The 14 goals was in the shortened season, though. So that season, he was probably on pace to get somewhere in the mid-20s or so. William Karlsson getting back to that, well, not back, but getting to that 25 to 27 goal range, I think is imperative for this to work. So if we pencil him for 15 additional goals, that gets him to be a 27 goal scorer. He's done it once, and he was close around it another time. Hopefully a new plan will help that. Now that's about 24 of the goals. Mark Stone, I would like to see him score a little bit more. He has had other years where he has scored over 30 goals. He's done once, 28, 26. Mark Stone was on pace for about 20 goals last year, given his injuries and his lack of games played. A healthy Mark Stone, let's make sure we're clear about that. A healthy Mark Stone is important. If he can go from 20 to 25 goals, now we're already at 29 goals, folks. We are at 29 goals. We're talking 8, 10, 12 more goals needed somewhere in the lineup. This is where hopefully someone like Brendan Brisson can make a splash at the NHL level. I think this is also an important piece of this plan. Brisson, honestly, is the one that reminds me most of Max Pacioretty, just simply watching him in his limited appearances at the AHL level. He just, shacked up at the circle, took that cross-ice pass on the power play. I think two of his first 3 goals were off the power play, scored just like that. Tic-tac-toe type of pass. He's on the circle. Not necessarily as strong of a shot as Ovechkin, but kind of that same style on the power play. He does have that finishing ability. So if he gets somewhere in the ballpark of, 6, 8, 10, 12 goals, all of a sudden, folks, that's 35 to 38 goals we have replaced on top of the hopefully 8 to 12 goals that will be absorbed other places in the lineup. So yeah, there's a lot of things that need to happen. Same breath. Max Pacioretty and Dadonov both are going to be 34. They're both turning 34 this season at some points. Can they be relied on to put in full seasons where they can get 30 and 20 goals respectively? I don't know. Pacioretty, I think, should be okay. Bone injuries last year, and he's going to be rejuvenated. Dadonov, I don't know. Dadonov, he doesn't excite me. And honestly, if it wasn't for all the nonsense with the Anaheim and the botched trade and him becoming the ultimate misfit for about 9 or 10 days, he's just a guy. So it'll be curious to see if this little plan I penciled together on this very high quality Post-it note works out. I just hope Kelly McCrimmon is doing better than I am with my note taking and my war room type of preparation for planning and stuff like that.
And I hope that William Karlsson is working on his scoring goals.
Yeah, that's going to be important.
On his honeymoon.
You did ask me about Jack Eichel. I want to give you a number there. Your question
and Chandler Stevenson too. And Chandler Stevenson is an interesting case because 21 goals last season, career best, 43 assists, 64 points on the season. But can he replicate that, or was this one of those flash in the pan seasons? So I'd like for you to address both of those, Chris.
Yeah, so let's start with Eichel. I really want to see Eichel go 30 and 50. 30 goals, 50 assists. He's done 50 assists one time in Buffalo. He has scored 30-plus goals one time, 1920, 42 assists, and oddly enough, a +5 on probably an absolutely horrendous team. So that says something to me about his ability to actually get back and play a little bit of defense. But Jack Eichel, 30 and 50 is where I think he needs to be for this trade to pay off dividends. So that was something else we did talk about yesterday with Gil on Locked on NHL as well. And then Chandler Stevenson. I mean, we give a lot of garbage to McPhee and McCrimmon for what they have done, but Chandler Stevenson and Nic Roy, we got on the cheap for absolutely basically nothing. So, we have to acknowledge that when you take someone who in 1920, 24 games with Washington, just 3 goals, comes to Vegas for 41 games, gets 8 goals. The next season in the shortened season, 14 goals in 51 games. So that prorates to a path for 26 goals, 25 goals. And then 79 games played last year, folks, 64 points, 21 and 43. He should be the line 2 center day one, probably, back there either with Marchie and Reilly Smith, kind of like the new Misfits type line. Maybe he does move to the wing a little bit. I like him back in center. Maybe there's something there with him and Brisson, who knows? But he went, what did I say, 21 goals last season? What was it? 21 and 43. Let's set the line at 23 and a half, and I will take the over for 56 cents.
Very good. Okay. And the fans that have been listening to this for a while know how bitter I was that Chandler Stevenson was not an all-star selection because he was playing much, much better than Marchessault. But of course,
he's just not a name. That's all it is, Tony. He's
Marchessault, the teacher's pet, of course. Yeah, that line, the Misfit line, they will forever be enamored with that line in the front office. And then Eichel, I think we could see some really big things out of him if he's again, healthy for this upcoming season.
Generational talent. They keep telling us that.
Right? And it's a matter of if this team can gel. The early start of this season is going to be real interesting. They need to get out to some sort of a decent start because, again, learning the new system, it's just going to be. I'm so curious about how this team gets started for this upcoming campaign.
They need to start well because the fans are nervous, folks. I get that. I know I'm the excited, happy-go-lucky fan that never thinks anything is wrong. I get that, folks. But if we don't have, like, let's go back to season 2 for a second. Nate Schmidt unfortunately starts the season suspended with all that nonsense with the additive or whatever the heck was inside of one random supplement that he took, and he has to sit out 20 games. And the team started very slow. Nate Schmidt comes back, and they went probably 20 or so games, getting like 37 points or something like that in those 20 games right after he came back. But this season, if things start slow, there's going to be a much more uneasy feeling because of the new system, the new coach, the players that were let go, for absolutely nothing. And people will be, calling for McCrimmon's job if things don't work out very well to start. So yes, the first 5 games I think are very important, but I think after the first 10 or 12 games, if we have like 3 wins and 5 losses and 4 points in overtime or something like that, we're gonna have a lot of angry callers. We're gonna have a lot of angry callers calling into the show. It'll be worse than the score from Chicago after a Bears game when they lose. It'd be a lot worse than that.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Hopefully, I like the conflict, as you know. Coming up next, we'll take a look at the Anaheim Ducks. They've done some things to help to improve that team, and we'll get into that in the Pacific Division right after this on Locked On Golden Knights. Welcome back to Locked On Golden Knights. Tony Cardasco and Chris Golick from Las Vegas now on your airwaves, if you will, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, of course, on YouTube and on Twitter. You can find us, your podcast, at Locked On VGK, and of course, find the podcast wherever you get your podcast. We are really absolutely everywhere, wherever I look, including Odyssey, which of course carries my radio show on that app on a weekly basis. And Chris, we wanted to get into some of the team. We had that one segment where we talked about the teams that made improvements. We said Anaheim is more or less going to be staying pat, but they, I think, surprised a lot of us this past week when they came out and announced the signing of John Klingberg, of course, the offensive defenseman. Klingberg, $7 million 1-year contract. It's a prove yourself sort of a deal for Klingberg. This past season, 6 goals, 41 assists. The eye opener on his stat chart, -28 plus minus though.
And that was with Dallas, wrong. Right? With Dallas.
Yeah, with Dallas. Well, yeah, that's the only team he's been with is with Dallas. And they did lose some pieces, as we know. The player that I coveted, I really wanted to see Josh Manson here. They lost Hampus Lindholm as well. And so is Klingberg that guy. And also, he is a specialist on the power play. Does he make a difference with the Anaheim Ducks?
I mean, Anaheim, Trevor Zegras, that's where it's at, I guess. And I mentioned many times that
Go ahead. And Terry?
Yeah, exactly. I mentioned many times that opening packs of hockey cards is basically a big part of my business. And I open packs of cards, send the cards to people when they hit them and stuff like that. And the Anaheim Ducks are a very popular team right now in that world because of Zegras. Not just Zegras, but also Drysdale and Mason McTavish. Yeah,
and Troy Terry too.
Yeah, yes. Exactly. So, there's a lot happening there right now. And I mean, also having Shattenkirk on defense, that's interesting. He was a -9 last year. So they're bringing in some good talent to mentor some of these younger players. And, you're right. We did say Anaheim's kind of running in place, but give it time. They're going to do something soon. But, again, maybe this is kind of saying, okay, maybe bringing in Klingberg will help us flirt with being a playoff team. We'll just kind of see what happens, because there's going to be a lot of teams that are going to be selling at the deadline this year. I've mentioned this a bunch of times now. as much fun as free agency was, as much fun as the draft was, and all the things that have been happening, not in Vegas by itself, but around the entire league, it's going to be even more interesting when the trade deadline comes, because there's a lot of teams that are strapped for cash, which is why Nazem Kadri hasn't been signed yet. If this was a regular situation and teams had probably that 4 or 5 million additional in cap right now, if it wasn't for COVID, Kadri would have been signed and probably even re-signed by Colorado, to be completely honest with you. But that's not the reality that we're in. So there's a lot of teams that are waiting to see what's going to happen around the deadline. And this could be a spot where Anaheim is a fringe bubble type team, and all of a sudden they're looking at Jonathan Toews and Patrick Kane around the deadline. And I don't know if I necessarily see those two individuals going to Anaheim, but those are not going to be the only players out there that are going to be potential trade bait around the deadline. And, I think Anaheim has some room when it comes to the cap, if I'm not mistaken, too.
They still might have some room available. That's pretty good. It's impressive. Their top six is pretty good now, with the additions of my Rangers. They rated my Rangers covered with Ryan Strome. They signed him to a 4-year deal. He'll be the second line center probably, with Trevor Zegras on the top line. And then Frank Vetrano. Vetrano will probably play wing with Strome there on the second line. Adam Henrique is on that top line. Mason McTavish is on the second line. There's a lot of talent. There's a little bit of a drop off with the third and fourth lines. You've got Max Comtois still in there, and Lundestrom and Derek Grant and Sam Carrick. Sam Carrick's pretty good. Jacob Silverberg, right? They've got some talent there, but I think their top six is where it's all going to happen this upcoming season.
I look at them as, I think I mentioned this in the first segment very, very briefly. I think they're going to take probably the same path that Detroit took. I think this is the year they kind of see what happens. And I think next year is when they really start making moves to potentially compete, not just in the Pacific, but in the West, and possibly for a cup. I mean, 18 million in cap space. They have 45 of 50 contracts. So, I mean, their roster is set right now. Their roster is very close to set, less a couple maybe, housekeeping type moves that need to be made as the season comes up, but approximately $18 in cap space right now. So let's wait and see. If Anaheim is borderline competitive, they're going to make a splash, I think, to make a move right now to potentially do something. Where that's going to come from, I don't know. But if this is not the year for Anaheim, I think next year they certainly announce their presence. And all of a sudden, Anaheim and Los Angeles, thinking back about the Pacific since VGK has been around, LA, sure, they were there, but we swept them, so who cares? And then I don't think they've been back to the playoffs, with the exception of this year in between there. Anaheim has not done anything since we've been around. So all of a sudden you have the shift happening, like in the Atlantic, with Detroit and Ottawa becoming relevant along with Buffalo. Maybe this is where the Kings, the Ducks start doing better. Seattle's improving right now. The Pacific next year or the following year, it's not going to be a doormat like what the rest of the league thinks it is right now.
Yeah, they signed some depth pieces as well. I think it was Colton White on defense, and Chase DeLeo from Detroit. I think they signed some good depth pieces there. They're filling in some gaps. And correct me if I'm wrong, but Anaheim had a pretty decent start last season. Then, of course, they started to fizzle towards the end. But again, I don't think those third and fourth lines are strong enough. And that's probably what they'll address here with that some of that remaining cap space and what have you. But that's a team that could be on the move. And as you said, it's been 4 years, I guess, since they've been a playoff team. And they'd be kind of fun to see in the playoffs. I would love to see Zegras in the playoffs.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, I was amazed watching Zegras at the All-Star Skills Competition this past February, I believe. That was, or maybe it was January, but either way, it was awesome seeing him. He certainly, the only thing bad about Zegras is he plays for Anaheim, who is by far not an A1 hockey market like Vegas is, apparently. So Zegras isn't going to get the national exposure. He's going to create it. Zegras will create his exposure, but he's not on Edmonton. He's not on Los Angeles. He's not on one of the original 6 teams. So if there's one knock on Zegras, it's the fact that he's a Duck, I guess. But outside of that, it's going to be so much fun to watch. When the Ducks come, they're going to be one of the teams that you circle on the calendar now. That wasn't how it was 3 years ago. I didn't care seeing the Ducks. I'd sell those tickets as fast as I could to anyone that wanted to pay me anything near face value for them.
Yeah, and Klingberg's going to bring that physical presence to the Pacific Division. It'd be interesting. You do have the defensive pairing. I still believe he'll keep it intact with Cam Fowler, and you mentioned Jamie Drysdale, and then he'll probably be the second defensive pairing. And again, a key piece to their power play unit because he's pretty strong on the power play. And yeah, this is a team. And again, if we're talking about Anaheim, their goaltending situation still John Gibson, right? And Anthony Stolars.
Yeah,
right?
John
Stolars.
Gibson is just the Ducks version of Mike Smith, in my opinion. John Gibson, I always joke about John Gibson. I probably said this on the show before. Gibson will be lights out, right? He'll be lights out for like a period and a half, and then all of a sudden he lets in 4 goals. Like John Gibson is shutout or 1 goal or 4 goals and nothing in between. That's a typical John Gibson day at the office right there.
And again, we can find Chris on Locked On NHL too. He'll have a cameo appearance there with our good friend Gil Martin, and you'll hear more of his comments, of course. That's really cool, and we'll post that coming up later today as well. Of course, you could find our show on Twitter at Locked On VGK, and now on YouTube, thanks to Chris, at Locked On.
I'm trying to spin the dials. It's starting to work.
It's starting to work, yeah. And we appreciate everyone subscribing, watching, listening. And your feedback is so important to this show. And we're not talking about kissing our butts. So I like when people call me negative. So that's good.
Is that your middle name? I thought that was your middle name. I thought that was on your driver's license.
I've made my mark here. For my man, Chris Golick, I'm Tony Cardasco. Again, we'll be back again on Wednesday. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks for making us your first listen each and every day. We'll see you again Wednesday right here on Locked On Golden Knights.